You may have heard that atheists tend to score better on reflection tests than theists. But why do scientists find this analytic atheism correlation? Many studies have attempted to answer this question. Of course, the best studies had limitations. So Steve Stich, Justin Sytsma, and I developed better methods and studied over 70,000 people on 6 continents. What did we find? Apostasy was key. Those who shed their religion since childhood were the most reflective. Lifelong atheists were not necessarily more reflective than theists. In other words, the analytic atheism correlation seems to be explained by analytic apostasy. In this episode, I'll explain the methods, results, and implications in our paper, Analytic Atheism and Analytic Apostasy Across Cultures, which will be published in Religious Studies. As always, free preprints of my papers are available on my CV at birdnick.com/CV under Publications. This episode's affiliate partner is PDF Expert. Since I bought PDF Expert in January 2016, it's been my primary reading and annotation application on Mac, iPad, and iPhone. I repeatedly try the best free and paid competitors, but I keep coming back to PDF Expert. Find out why at readle.8kpa2n.net/Byrd. BYRD. I'll put the link in this description. Analytic Atheism and Analytic Apostasy Across Cultures. Abstract. Many studies find reflective thinking predicts less belief in God, or less religiosity, so-called analytic atheism. However, those results involve various limitations. The most widely used tests of reflection confound reflection with ancillary abilities, such as numeracy. Some studies do not detect analytic atheism in every country. Experimentally encouraging reflection makes some believers more open to believing in God, and one of the most common sources of online research participants seems to produce lower data quality. So, analytic atheism may be less than universal or partially explained by confounding factors. To test this, we developed better measures, controlled for more confounds, and employed more recruitment methods. All 4 studies detected signs of analytic atheism above and beyond confounds in over 70,000 people from 5 of 6 continental regions. We also discovered analytic apostasy. The better a person performed on reflection tests, the better their odds of losing their religion since childhood, even when controlling for confounds. Analytic apostasy even seemed to explain analytic atheism. Apostates were more reflective than others, and analytic atheism was undetected after excluding apostates. Religious conversion was rare and unrelated to reflection, suggesting reflection's relationships to conversion and deconversion are asymmetric. Detected relationships were usually small, indicating reflective thinking is a reliable, albeit marginal, predictor of apostasy. Introduction. Reflective reasoning is the familiar phenomenon of backing up from an initial impulse to reappraise it in light of reasons and alternatives. Philosophers tend to think that reflective reasoning is good. Reflection is supposed to correct faulty impulses or find reasons that justify beliefs that we had not yet questioned. Sure enough, correct answers on reflection tests predict better reasoning about logic, probability, and physics. Not surprisingly, when some scientists found that unreflective thinking correlated with theism and reflective thinking correlated with atheism, and other scientists labeled these results with the name, quote, analytic atheism, end quote, philosophers quickly noted how the name, quote, earnestly congratulates religion on its lack of cognitive content, end quote. Of course, anyone who has studied religion knows that highly reflective believers exist. As such, they may wonder whether these reflective religionists simply do not make it into the studies that find reflective thinking correlating with atheism or agnosticism. However, even studies including academic philosophers find moderate correlations between reflection and atheism. This suggests that links between reflection and areligiosity might be somewhat prevalent. However, links between reflection and areligiosity are not ubiquitous. Despite finding the correlation between reflection and disbelief across about a dozen countries, researchers do not find it within each of those countries. And when studying causal relationships between reflection and religiosity, the so-called analytic atheist effect is not always observed. Worse, there are enough problems with standard protocols for measuring and manipulating reflection that we may need to reconsider whether many prior results actually support the conclusion that atheism is linked to analytic or reflective thinking. To address these mixed results and methodological concerns, we developed better measures of religiosity, reflection, and known confounds. In multiple large studies, people from around the world exhibited signs of analytic atheism and even analytic apostasy. Data were filtered and analyzed in Jamovi to allow readers to reproduce our analyses without any coding experience or paywalled software. All collected data and exclusions are reported. Pre-registration, data, analysis files, and appendix are available on the Open Science Framework. Study 1. Prior to pre-registering new research designs, hypotheses, and analyses, we wanted to test whether an analytic atheist correlation could be found in a large, culturally diverse sample while controlling for potentially confounding factors. The idea was that if the expected relationship were found in this high-powered dataset, it would be worth pre-registering more sophisticated studies. Method. From 2009 to 2018, a Google ad invited people to take surveys in return for personality test results, also known as the push-out method, which has been shown to yield more demographically diverse samples than pull-in methods such as Amazon Mechanical Turk, Cloud Research, or Prolific. Data were collected for a large collection of other studies, but this paper is the first to fully aggregate and analyze the data for insights about analytic atheism. Participants. Of the people who clicked the advertisement and consented to participate, 71,591 completed versions of the survey that included measures of our target variables, religiosity and reflection. To mitigate the impact of low data quality or low power, we excluded from analysis participants who reported at least one of the following: an age of 100 or more, a wildly implausible answer to any reflection test question, a country that is either insincere, such as Earth or Agrabah, or that fewer than 100 other participants reported. The following analyses are based on the remaining sample of 65,873 responses. Materials. Participants took a reflection test and answered questions about religiosity, personality, politics, as well as demographics. Descriptive statistics for Study 1 are in Table 1. Demographics. Participants were asked to report their age, gender, income, political orientation, and country. Education. Participants selected their educational attainment as well as university education in philosophy and psychology. First language. Our survey was written in English, but Google Ads may appear to users who are not fluent users of English, who may choose answers without fully understanding the question or their answer. To control for this measurement error, participants were asked to report if English was their first language. Religiosity. Participants answered, if religiosity is defined as participating with an organized religion, then to what degree do you consider yourself religious? On a scale from not at all to totally, with somewhat at the midpoint. They also reported their religion. 10-item personality inventory. Participants also rated their agreement with 10 descriptions of their personality, such as dependable, self-disciplined, or extroverted, enthusiastic, on a scale from disagree strongly to agree strongly. Pairs of scores were summed to produce scores for 5 traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Cognitive reflection test. Participants completed the original 3-item cognitive reflection test. Each item is designed to lure participants to choose an answer that seems correct, also known as the lure, but that, upon reflection, is demonstrably incorrect. Consider an example. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? The lured answer is 10 cents. But the correct answer is 5 cents. Correct answers on the test were summed. So were lured answers, which were the most common responses for each item. Results. Linear regression was used to predict religiosity. Figure 1 shows a small negative correlation between religiosity and correct reflection test answers, controlling for lured reflection test answers. After controlling for other measured variables, reflection's relationship with religiosity remained, was negative in most countries, and independent of education and even in training in philosophy. The appendix's Table A1 reports the results of the full model, which accounts for 13% of the variance in religiosity. Collinearity statistics are in Table A2. Discussion. Study 1 conceptually replicated analytic atheist correlations in a large, culturally diverse sample. Reflection test performance predicted a small amount of variance in religiosity across 8 countries, and country-by-country relationships between religiosity and reflection were usually negative. Of course, there are limitations to what we can infer from Study 1. Crucially, we cannot necessarily infer from these correlations between people that within each person, on average, religiosity decreases as reflection increases. And since Study 1 was run, limitations about some of the measures have emerged. Mounting evidence has suggested that this original 3-item reflection test confounds reflection with math ability. Worse, studies have found that correlations between philosophical inclinations and this mathematical reflection test may have more to do with math than reflective thinking. Moreover, the US-centric or Western-centric terminology in this survey may mask nuance. For example, one-dimensional questions about political orientation overlook how variables such as religiosity and reflection can relate to social conservatism differently than they do to economic conservatism. So we sought funding for follow-up studies that employ more suitable study design and measures. Study 2. Study 2 aimed to develop better materials to test reflection, not just math ability, detect changes in religiosity, and measure potentially confounding factors. Method. In Study 2, we employed a pull recruitment method to validate better measures of reflection, religiosity, demographics, and education with participants from the United States. Participants. We pulled in only those Amazon Mechanical Turk workers that passed a battery of Cloud Research's quality controls, since MTurk's internal metrics, such as approved rate or minimum submissions, are not good indicators of quality. We aim to recruit 250 people to allow observational relationships to stabilize. The following analyses exclude only those respondents who did not complete the required survey questions or failed an attention check, leaving a final sample of 251. Compensation was $3 US. Materials. Participants took a novel reflection test and answered questions about religion, politics, education, as well as demographics. Table 2 shows descriptive statistics for demographics, education, reflection, and religion for Study 2. Demographics. After participants reported birth year and gender, they indicated political orientation with some additional response options. As predicted by research conducted since data for Study 1 were collected, 37 of our participants from Study 2 selected Don't Know, Libertarian, or Other. To overcome potential limitations of the one-dimensional political scale, participants were also able to indicate both social, and economic conservatism on the same scale, from very liberal to very conservative. Participants also reported the country in which they were raised, the religion in which they were raised, and their current religion. Due to underrepresentation of non-Christian religions in this sample, they were collapsed into an other religion bucket to maximize the statistical power in our analyses. General education. Participants selected their highest level of education ranging from less than a high school degree to doctoral or professional degree, with an option to report other, which 8 participants selected, usually because they reported attending technical, trade, or vocational school. Some university but no degree was the most common response. We also asked for parents' highest levels of education using the same scale, yielding a median response of associate's degree and a modal response of high school graduate. To pilot a more cross-culturally robust measure of education, we asked for the number of years that participants had been, quote, a student, including prior to the university level, at the university level, and above the university level, end quote. We also asked for the number of years one's parents were students. As expected, the number of years as a student strongly predicted educational attainment. Domain-specific education. To control for confounds with reflection test performance, we also asked participants to report the number of STEM and philosophy courses they had taken. Likewise, we asked, have you ever studied critical thinking? With yes and no response options. Abbreviated religiosity scale. We piloted a short but broad religiosity scale to maximize response quality in subsequent studies by using fewer items than many validated religiosity scales contain. The abbreviated scale exhibited excellent reliability. Moreover, all but the superstition item loaded on one factor. Religious belief and identity. Participants rated their agreement with 6 items on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, with neither agree nor disagree at the midpoint. Religious practice. Participants also reported the frequency of attending religious events and practicing religious disciplines on a scale from never to more than once per week. Religion's importance. Participants rated the importance of religious or spiritual community and belief on a scale from highest importance to irrelevant, with not applicable as an option, which 48 participants, or 19%, selected. Religion's influence on life and morality. Given how much some religions moralize their religious norms, participants rated how much their religious or spiritual beliefs influenced their, quote, life decisions, end quote, and, quote, moral beliefs, end quote, on a scale from a great deal to not at all, with 41 participants, or 16%, selecting I don't have religious or spiritual beliefs. Belief in the supernatural. Participants also selected up to 26 beliefs in supernatural entities, processes, or powers. Although unanalyzed, the data are openly available. Long religiosity scales. To gauge how our abbreviated religion scale items correlated with some validated religion scales, we had participants complete some validated religion scales. Reliability was high for all scales. As such, each scale's scores were averaged. Our abbreviated religion items correlated with the extended religion scales that track broad religious belief and commitment. As intended, all abbreviated items except, quote, superstitious, end quote, correlated with both the 12-item religious worldview scale and the modified 6-item intrinsic spirituality scale. Some of our abbreviated items correlated with the 7-item intrinsic religiosity scale. As expected, our abbreviated items did not correlate with narrow religious constructs, like those measured by the 12-item religious fundamentalism or even 7-item extrinsic religiosity scales. Also expected, the extended religion scales did not correlate as well with one another as our abbreviated religiosity items did. Indeed, only intrinsic and extrinsic religiosity seemed related. Less expected was that our religious reflection item, did not correlate with quest religiosity. Overall, these data confirmed that our abbreviated religious items measured what we intended using fewer items than previously validated scales. Given these findings, further analyses focused on the abbreviated rather than extended scales. Novel reflection test. To dissociate reflection from reflection test familiarity, we used novel adaptations of the nurse, race, and T test questions from Calvillo et al. As intended, participants perceived test familiarity was not related to their test performance. To dissociate reflection from numeracy, one of these items was less mathematical. Quote, "You're participating in a race. You pass the person in third place. What place are you in now?" End quote. We employed a validated 4-option response format, including the correct answer, third place, the lure, second place, and 2 incorrect answers, first or fourth place. We summed correct responses and lured responses, each of which loaded on a single factor, ignoring other incorrect answers. Attention check. To further mitigate the impact of low data quality on results, we embedded an instructional attention check into our religion scale. Quote, "Select strongly agree for this item." End quote. Before starting the survey, participants were told it contained this kind of check. Survey experience. The final required question was, quote, "Overall, how positive was your experience of this survey?" End quote, with response options ranging from extremely negative to extremely positive, with neither negative nor positive at the midpoint. Results. In addition to Analytic Atheism, Study 2 revealed a potentially novel result, Analytic Apostasy. Analytic Atheism. Like Study 1, we found small bivariate correlations between answers to our religiosity items and performance on our novel reflection test. Correct reflection test responses predicted less identification as a religious or spiritual person, belief in religious phenomena, practicing of religious or spiritual disciplines, valuing of religious community or belief, and influence of religion or spirituality on life or moral decisions. Also, there were small correlations between overconfidence and both identifying as religious and practicing religious disciplines. No other religious, spiritual, or superstitious items correlated with overconfidence. Analytic apostasy. Binomial logistic regression was used to predict apostasy. Correct reflection test answers predicted 1.6 times higher odds of losing one's childhood religion. The bottom left plot of Figure 2 illustrates how reflection's relationship with religiosity remained even after controlling for other measured variables. The bottom right of Figure 2 shows how replacing correct with lured reflection test responses predicted the opposite. As individuals' lured answers increased, the odds of losing one's religion decreased by more than 30%, even when controlling for other factors. Reflection also predicted at least as extreme odds of Christian apostasy. Statistics for the full model of Study 2 are in the appendix, beginning with Table A4. Mini-replication of analytic apostasy. To quickly gauge the possibility that these analytic apostasy results were endemic to M-Turk workers, we pulled in 106 prolific workers from the United States, after excluding 5 non-completers, to the abbreviated version of this survey. Controlling for the same measures, reflection test performance predicted even more extreme odds of both general apostasy and Christian apostasy. These relationships remained even when controlling for additional measures in the mini-replication, such as subjective numeracy, objective numeracy, and attention. Discussion. Study 2 conceptually replicated and extended analytic atheism. People who had more correct reflection test answers were less religious on average than people who had fewer correct answers. Likewise, the more that people fell for the lure on reflection tests, the more religious they were. Extending those between-person results are the within-person analytic apostasy results. The probability of a person losing their religion since childhood was predicted by both correct and lured reflection test answers. The better someone performed on the reflection test, the higher their odds of being an apostate, and the more that someone fell for the lure on the reflection test question, the lower their odds of being an apostate. Like Study 1, these observational results are considered small by at least some researchers in epidemiology. Nonetheless, the successful mini-replication among participants from another source suggests the result is somewhat robust. Be that as it may, Study 2 had notable limitations. First, all Study 2 participants were from the United States. As such, Study 2 cannot by itself support the conclusion that analytic apostasy transcends a particular cultural context. Second, another interesting hypothesis is whether, in addition to religious deconversion, also known as apostasy, reflection predicts religious conversion, that is, becoming religious. That is, does reflection predict changing one's mind about religion in both directions? Unfortunately, conversion seems rare. Study 2 had only 9 respondents, or 4% of the sample, that indicated religious conversion, and the mini-replication had half as many converts. Given this, Study 2 could not detect this hypothetical analytic conversion even if it existed in the target population. Study 3. Study 3 was a pre-registered replication and extension of the results of Study 2. The main goal was to test the replicability of analytic atheism and analytic apostasy in the United States and test how those results depend on country, either United Kingdom or United States, or on participant source, either mTurk or prolific, all while controlling for a few more potentially confounding factors such as numeracy. Method. The results of prior studies enable us to better measure our intended constructs in Study 3, and with fewer yet more cross-cultural measures. Participants. To maximize the statistical power and efficiency of Study 3, we pulled participants into one survey from the sources of both Study 2, mTurk, and its mini-replication, prolific. To allow observational relationships to stabilize, we aimed to recruit another 250 respondents from each country per platform. Cloud Research pulled in 256 mTurk workers from the US, and Prolific pulled in 528 workers from both the US and the UK. Participants were offered $1.80 US. Our analyses excluded only participants who automatically exited the survey after choosing, quote, "I do not consent to participate in this study," end quote, on the first page, who did not complete the required portion of the survey, who had a reCAPTCHA score of a likely bot, or reported a country other than one of the 2 eligible countries, leaving a final sample of 741. Descriptive statistics for Study 3 are reported in Table 3. Materials. Study 3 consolidated the materials of Study 2 to make room for a few more control variables without increasing the survey length in a way that could sacrifice data quality. Study 2 materials. We reused the demographic, education, and reflection test items from Study 2. Other items were removed to streamline the survey. Minor changes or additions to our materials are explained below. Consolidated religion and spirituality scales. We consolidated our 12-item scale of both religiosity and spirituality from Study 2 into 2 5-item scales, one for religiosity and one for spirituality. The reused items were person, reflection, belief importance, community importance, and one new item, upbringing. Quote, "I was raised in a religious or spiritual household," end quote. These dual 5-item scales bought us dissociation between religiosity and spirituality without costing us the data quality of a lengthier survey. Response options ranged from strongly disagree to strongly agree. All 5 items from each scale loaded onto a single component, and reliability was excellent for both scales, so scores on each set of 5 items were averaged. Reflection test lure consideration and reflective responding. A substantial minority of people answer reflection tests correctly without actually reflecting. To reduce such reflection test measurement error, we asked participants that didn't select the lure if they had considered the lure before selecting their answer. Every correct answer that involved consideration of the lure counted as reflective. Reflective answers for the 3 questions loaded onto one component, and reflective answers correlated with other reflection and expected political metrics without correlating with gender. Objective numeracy. Participants completed a die rolling probability test and a frequency to percent conversion task with the same 4-option response format as the reflection test. Correct answers were summed and scores loaded on the same component, so we averaged the number of correct answers per participant. Subjective numeracy. Participants answered both, quote, how good are you at figuring out how much something will cost if it's discounted by 1/4, end quote, and, quote, how good are you at figuring out how much something will cost if it is discounted by 15%, end quote, on a 6-point scale from not at all good to extremely good. Scores loaded on the same component with high reliability. Correct answers per respondent were averaged. Math sentiment. Participants were asked, quote, how good are you at doing math, end quote, and, quote, how do you feel about math, end quote, on a 7-point scale from terrible or I hate math to great or I love math. Scores loaded on the same component with high reliability. This item score is the average number of correct answers per participant. Better data quality controls. There's growing evidence that conventional attention checks are either insufficient or counterproductive. For example, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control posted a report that 4% of survey respondents reported, quote, drinking or gargling diluted bleach solutions, end quote, during the pre-vaccine portion of the COVID-19 pandemic. Cloud Research replicated this result, but found that, quote, 80 to 90% of reports of household cleanser ingestion, end quote, were from respondents who also selected impossible claims such as, quote, having had a fatal heart attack, end quote, or, quote, eating concrete for its iron content, end quote. Cloud research has shown that many such low-quality responses come from people in developing countries who use virtual private networks and assistance from third parties to feign eligibility for relatively short surveys that pay the equivalent of a day's wages. Because we recruited not just from Cloud Research, but also Prolific, we attempted to overcome these data quality issues by adding measures of bot-like behavior and English proficiency to our instructional attention check from our prior studies. Bot-like behavior. In addition to the quantitative reCAPTCHA version 3 metric of bot-like behavior used in Study 2, Study 3 collected qualitative data about respondent effort or comprehension. Participants were shown an image of someone showing a strong negative emotion and given this simple instruction. In one complete sentence, describe what may have happened immediately before this photo was taken. Few participants performed poorly on the bot test. Examples of poor responses contained no English words, were not complete sentences, did not make any sense, or described the photo rather than its antecedent, such as, quote, angry or, quote, angry woman, end quote. Because even fewer of these respondents remained after the above-mentioned exclusions, the results do not seem to be impacted by them. English proficiency. We also asked participants, quote, what material is the shirt in the photo above, end quote. Response options included the correct answer, cotton, and 2 words that look similar to someone with poor English proficiency, cobalt and copper. Correct answers were added to the sum of past attention checks. Childhood unpredictability. Between Study 2 and 3, we learned that childhood predictability may be related to both religiosity and reasoning style. Given our focus on how reasoning style predicts changes in religiosity since childhood, we thought it prudent to measure and control for childhood unpredictability using 3 items from validated scales. After reading, quote, when I was younger than 10, end quote, participants rated their agreement with, quote, things were often chaotic in my house, end quote, and, quote, people often moved in and out of my house upon a pretty random basis, end quote. and, quote, I had a hard time knowing what my parents or other people in my house were going to say or do from day to day, end quote, on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Results. We detected signs of analytic atheism and analytic apostasy using both correct and reflectively correct test answers, even when controlling for other measured variables. Nonetheless, other variables such as participant source and numeracy were also predictive of both reflection test performance and apostasy. Analytic atheism. The top of Figure 3 shows how reflection test performance correlated with our religiosity and spirituality items. We detected correlations between half of these religio-spiritual items and lured answers, always positive. We detected similar correlations using the number of lures people considered. Moreover, we found correlations between most of the religio-spiritual items and correct reflection test answers, always negative. Familiarity with reflection test correlated similarly. We detected religious reflection correlating only with reflectively correct answers and positively. As the number of reflectively correct answers increased, the importance of thinking critically about religion increased. We did not detect correlations between the new religious or spiritual upbringing items and any reflection test metric. Analytic apostasy. In Study 3, correct reflection test answers predicted slightly higher odds of general apostasy before controlling for confounds, and, as Figure 3 shows, even higher odds of apostasy when controlling for confounds. The higher odds of apostasy attributable to objective numeracy, above and beyond confounds, were more attenuated. Reflectively correct answers also predicted higher odds of general apostasy above and beyond confounds. Notably, in this model, the relationship between reflection and apostasy interacted with participant source. Compared to MTurk workers, prolific workers' reflectively correct answers predicted lower odds of apostasy. Moreover, in this model, prolific users had more than twice the odds of apostasy compared to the MTurk workers, even though UK participants had nearly half the odds of apostasy as US participants. Lured answers did not clearly predict apostasy before controlling for confounds, or after. Contrary to our pre-registered expectations, reflection test performance was not a stronger predictor of Christian apostasy than general apostasy. Odds of Christian apostasy increased with reflectively correct answers, but to a similar degree as general apostasy, albeit not beyond conventional thresholds of significance. Also, neither lured nor merely correct answers were related to Christian apostasy in Study 3, above and beyond the other factors such as country or participant source. Discussion. Even after improving our measure of reflection and controlling for more confounds, we replicated signs of analytic atheism and analytic apostasy across countries and participant sources. These replications and extensions strengthen confidence in the results from Study 2. There are at least 3 limitations of Study 3. The first 2 are the same as the prior study. First, Study 3 sampled from just 2 Western countries, preventing us from generalizing its results to other countries and cultures. Second, like Study 2, Study 3 was unable to recruit enough religious converts to test the analytic conversion hypothesis. Just 20 people, or 3% of the sample in Study 3, became religious since childhood. And third, inextricable overlap between country and participant source may make it impossible to disentangle country or platform-based differences in reflection test familiarity from country or platform-based differences in analytic atheism or analytic apostasy. The main reason is that all MTurk workers were from the US, while prolific workers were from either the US or the UK. So every country-level analysis is partly a platform-level analysis, and vice versa. Study 4. To overcome the limitations of Study 3, we needed a larger, more culturally diverse sample. For this, we returned to the push method used in our first study. From February 2023 to March 2024, we pushed an ad to people on English-language Google web pages with English-language browser settings. Participants. More than 21,000 people entered the survey from the ad, and 5,137 completed it. The following analyses excludes only people who reported a country that was not listed in Qualtrics' pre-populated list of 193 countries. Materials. People who clicked the ad were directed to a survey that was identical to Study 3, with one difference. Study 4 re-implemented the personality test and score from Study 1 to compensate ad-recruited participants. Descriptive statistics for Study 4 are reported in Table 4. Results. In this final push study, we detected signs of analytic atheism and analytic apostasy, but not analytic conversion or analytic aspirituality. Analytic atheism. Figure 4 shows how correct reflection test answers predicted lower religiosity, albeit less so after controlling for confounds. The full model explained 20% of the variance in religiosity. Replacing correct answers with reflectively correct answers predicted a smaller decrease in religiosity, but not above and beyond other confounds, such as objective numeracy. Nonetheless, correct responses predicted apostasy in nearly every United Nations region. Only the 55 participants from Oceania bucked the trend. In the same model, correct answers also predicted lower spirituality until controlling for confounds. Relationships between spirituality and reflectively correct answers were not detected before or after controlling for confounds. Analytic apostasy. Study 4 replicated the prior study's analytic apostasy result. Correct reflection test answers predicted greater odds of apostasy even after controlling for confounds. Replacing correct answers with reflectively correct answers in this model predicted similarly higher odds of apostasy until controlling for all confounds. The results for Christian apostasy were nearly identical. The odds of Christian apostasy were predicted to increase by at least as much for correct reflection answers, even after controlling for confounds. Replacing correct with reflectively correct answers predicted similarly higher odds of Christian apostasy until controlling for confounds. Analytic conversion. Study 4 recruited enough religious converts to test the analytic conversion hypothesis. However, the odds of converting to religion were not predicted by correct, reflectively correct, or lured answers before or after controlling for confounds. Instead of analytic conversion, we detected that the odds of conversion were higher among women, among people from Europe, and varied with childhood unpredictability, controlling for other factors. Controlling for the same factors, odds of conversion decreased as agreeableness increased and math sentiment increased. Can analytic apostasy explain analytic atheism? The size and measures of Study 4 also allowed us to test whether analytic atheism is explained by analytic apostasy. If removing the apostates from the sample eliminates the analytic atheist correlation, then perhaps only apostates are more reflective, and lifelong atheists and agnostics are about as reflective as religious believers. Sure enough, when apostates were filtered out of the sample, the general analytic atheist correlation became non-significant. Moreover, apostates performed better on reflection tests than all others. Together, these results suggest that analytic atheism may be largely explained by apostasy, not atheism per se. Discussion. Study 4 replicated the analytic atheist, analytic apostasy, and analytic Christian apostasy relationships we pre-registered for Study 3. We also found analytic atheism was largely explained by apostates' outstandingly reflective thinking. However, we did not detect signs of analytic conversion. As such, reflection's relationship to religious changes were not symmetrical. Reflection tended to predict deconversion, but not conversion. General discussion. The latest research continues to find that reflective reasoning predicts disbelief in God. And even in a meta-analysis in which atheist apostates were the most reflective, both converts and apostates who changed most of their beliefs were more reflective than theists who never changed their beliefs. Our results conceptually replicate these results and extend them with studies that mitigate measurement error, control for more confounds, analyze within-person changes in religiosity, and exploit push recruitment for samples that are larger and more diverse than is typical. Since cognitive scientists of religion deemed religiosity more intuitive and areligiosity more reflective, there has been disagreement about the normative upshots of analytic atheism. Some have suggested that the intuitiveness of religious belief is a mark against believing, given the limitations of intuition. However, others have argued that the intuitiveness of religious belief is actually a point against disbelief. Another view is to resist normative conclusions about the correlates of intuition and reflection, given that demographics are among the correlates and therefore could lead to controversial conclusions. Of course, some philosophers of religion have argued that religious beliefs are normatively unrelated to intuition or reflection because religious beliefs are, quote, properly basic, end quote, and therefore do not require reflective thinking. This line of thinking may be popular among ordinary people who often employ more permissive epistemic standards for religion than science. However, even believing scholars who have seen our results have admitted that because reflection tests predict better judgment in many domains, it's difficult to see how analytic apostasy could be as favorable to religious belief as disbelief. We look forward to further analysis of analytic atheism and analytic apostasy from our colleagues in religious studies. Conclusion. Thousands of people from dozens of countries were recruited in multiple ways to complete multiple survey instruments to triangulate on the relationship between religiosity and reflective thinking. They repeatedly exhibited signs of analytic atheism. The more reflectively people reasoned, the less religious they were. Although less reliable, they also exhibited signs of analytic aspirituality. The more reflectively people reasoned, the less spiritual they were. Finally, they exhibited analytic apostasy. The more reflectively a person reasoned, the higher that person's odds were of losing their religion since childhood. Importantly, our data also suggests that atheists appear more reflective in large part because the apostates in their midst are significantly more reflective than others. The reported relationships were small, which is compatible with cases of exceptionally reflective believers and converts. So, analytic atheism, analytic aspirituality, and analytic apostasy may describe phenomena that occur at the margins in the economist's sense. Reflective thinking does not guarantee or even characterize areligiosity or apostasy, but on average, reflective thinking does seem to predict more decreases in religiosity than increases, not just between individuals, but within individuals. This episode's affiliate partner is PDF Expert. Since I bought PDF Expert in January 2016, it's been my primary reading and annotating app on Mac, iPad, and iPhone. I often try the best free and paid competitors, but I keep coming back to PDF Expert. Find out why at readle.8kpa2n.net/Byrd. That's BYRD. Link in the description. If you liked the Upon Reflection podcast, subscribe wherever you find podcasts, leave a review, and tell people about it. You can also follow my daily posts about cognitive science on Blue Sky at birdnick.com, on Mastodon at birdnick, and all the other platforms. Comments and questions can be submitted at birdnick.com/contact.